collectively as a people. So if we have a broader definition of politics, then we begin to see that young people have and actually continue to take a very active role in politics at the lower levels. I think the issue becomes now this national elective politics. And I think one of the mistakes that we make is that we assume that the night before someone turns 18, they're 17 years and 11 months and some few days, the day after they turn 18, somehow they're supposed to immediately know how they're supposed to vote, the things to consider, and those kinds of things. But if we socialize our young people early enough in the art of decision-making, in the art of forming ideas, advocating for those ideas, in the art of organizing, then we'll be able to see a lot more young people get active. But this thing of waiting when people turn 18, somehow, the night before they are children, the following day they are adults who are supposed to suddenly understand how to involve themselves in politics, I think then that's where we make a mistake. But if we also appreciate the broader definition of politics, we begin to see that there are a lot more young people getting involved in the decisions around their schools, the decisions in churches, the decisions around their communities, and we just need to harness that earlier on and build on it so that when people are turning 18 and they're expected now to take part in, say, elective politics, party politics, then they're able to channel that same energy and that same understanding and knowledge into now this more national discourse where now it's more visible in Parliament and Senate.
Okay, so bottom-up approach is quite important. Gloria, let me bring you into this. I mean, politics is local. You must be active at the local level in order to make a difference, whether it's at the national level or parliamentary level as well. But questions usually do arise, knowing the nature of politics in the country, in terms of mentorship, in terms of finances to actually drive your campaign to get to that seat. I know we have very few cases of some leaders who went there with barely any money for campaigns, but that's not usually the norm. And we have a youthful population who might not be adequately empowered economically as compared to the older ones. How do we break this chain?
Just when you were asking me that question on resources, I was just thinking about, I think he was called Paul Mwirigi.
Yeah, exactly.
The Gembe South.
Sweater.
At 23 years old, campaigned on foot, and he actually managed to win the candidate from the ruling party. Yeah, was it from... It was a heavyweight anyway.
Yes, yes.
And there was the other guy also who campaigned on a bicycle, MCA, 24 years old. So, I mean, I don't want to say that resources are not necessary, but I'm saying, I mean, if you're passionate, if you're really passionate about leadership, about getting into that political space, I think that you can start from somewhere, that you might not have the resources that you require, but you know, you have the passion, you have the... You have the drive. And so when I think about Paul Mwirigi, I think, you know, he said he didn't fear that his opponents had resources to do the posters, to do what, to go on, to put up advertisements and things like that. He actually just said, you know what, I'm going to go out and I'm going to ask my community to give me the votes. But having said that, I do believe that, as you said, politics is local. So the sensitization that we need to have with our current youthful leaders is that, how do you get into those local spaces? You know, above and beyond coming to sit here and on national TV and doing your advocacy, how then do you technically scale down your activity down to where you're going to ask for those votes? I feel as though that is the challenge, because the leaders on a local level are actually very, very they're not very welcoming of the youthful leaders. So you find that you're almost set for failure at the very beginning. So I come from Kisii County. Fortunately, I have had a very good reception in terms of mentorship, in terms of the veteran politicians sort of saying, okay, you know what, we'll see what you have to offer, let's hold your hand. But it's not the same in other counties, and it's definitely not the same for women from other places, like, for instance, northeastern or just the marginalized areas where women are considered as a weaker gender who should not even participate in politics. So I think going forward, I mean, we can't always ask so much from the government, but going forward, I feel as though when you have agencies such as the National Youth Council, when you have agencies or ministries that are there to push the youth agenda, these are some of the initiatives that they need to really look into. How do we identify, first of all, those political youth leaders who would like to step up and get into the scene. Once you identify them, what can we do to empower them in terms of resources, in terms of capacity building? Because most of those people are passionate about leading, but they also, for instance, are not aware of the constitution. They're not aware of even the elective seats that they're going to vie for. Like, you know, if I vie for MCA, what are the things that I can promise my community? So I think, and these are some of the things, Jesse, that I keep saying. This is why we need to get into those elective seats and into those appointed seats, because as the forefront youth leaders, we must be able to then say, let's pave the path for those who are struggling, for the future youth leaders who will then come and find that there's a policy that protects them, that there's an institution that empowers them in terms of resources, and so therefore we start building a culture of embracing the youth in politics.
Speaking of culture, Alenga, you took us back, the days of Tom Mboya, karaoke as well, Mwai Kibaki when he was on his younger age. They were great thinkers and leaders, but the youth of this generation might have come under criticism, the microwave generation, we want things really fast. In terms of impact-based politics and the leaders, the youthful leaders who are currently in positions of power, what do you make of the impact they actually have once they clinch these particular seats?
I think to begin with, we must recognize our problem as a country. We have a huge problem in terms of glorifying age rather than judging somebody based on the content of their ability, character, and personality. There are so many bright people, bright young people, there are so many industrious young people, and if they are given an opportunity to be able to be tested in those capacities, then they will actually prove a point. But our country, the culture that we have is a culture that really glorifies age. You have seen, even not in politics, but also in appointments, even to when you are applying for a job. A youth is asked to have experience of 15 years. If you're looking for somebody with experience of 15 years, it's probably somebody who is in close to their 50s. Looking at the kind of education system that we have, somebody maybe clears university at about 24, 25. So at 15, they are almost into that age bracket of 40 to 50. And those are the people that we give opportunities. But when it comes to young people, there's so many hurdles ahead of them. And it even becomes much complicated for the young women in this generation. But then, can we cultivate an element of trust with the young people? These are the same people we spend money on to take them to schools. We even sell our livestock to be able to take them to school. But when it comes now, they have gained those skills, they have learned a lot of globalization tools, and they come back and ask us for positions, then we sit aside and say, well, will he manage? But then we cannot only look at the few people, the few young people that have stepped into the leadership position and been given opportunities to be able to lead. We must wholesomely look at the youth generation and focus on the ability they have and focus on the new skills they have that we could put into our leadership systems. We are currently operating on the same principles that were in this country when we gained independence. And those are principles that look at consolidating power and sharing it within a circle that is supposed to protect you and the power around you. Such are not progressive thoughts that we should be carrying into this 21st century. So can we now get the young people who are global citizens, who are not drawing their validity from their tribe, from their clan, from their age sets and all that, and even their college mates or staff, but they are drawing their validation from the skills that they bring on the table. Let our competitive advantage as young people be the new skills that we are bringing on the table, the kind of politics that we want to bring the country together, unite the country together, not divide us according to tribal lines, and then you can say, I have these numbers from my community, I am the kingpin of this community. The politics of kingship in this country has actually undermined the path of democracy, and that is why we need a gradual change, we need a generational change, we actually need a takeover, because the older people have locked opportunities for young people. Political contests have been made very expensive, and it's very difficult for young people to marshal efforts to be able to enter into the space. The first impediment they come through is I do not have enough money to mount this campaign. But as Gloria had rightly pointed, this also becomes, if you study the geopolitics of this country, it now becomes an issue that we can easily map to an area. There are areas, there are places in this country that are very receptive of young people. They are supportive of young people. Like if you look at the Kalenjin land, they have been able to elect very many young people, including a very youthful governor for Nandi County, and also even Meru and other regions. So if we can proceed in that direction, then we will save the country and the youth will have a space.
Thumbi, you mentioned something very critical, political goodwill in the country. And I'd like to digress to the political parties we have. Basically, they're vehicles in order to achieve a certain agenda or to drive an agenda to get to State House or, you know, the political game. But in terms of the ideologies within these political parties, is there space for the youth? How exactly can we impact, bearing in mind your member, or rather your member of the Jubilee Party, and some of the issues that arose once you aligned with the Deputy President? What do you make of the space within political parties, and how can youth take advantage of that?
Like I said, the political party is supposed to play a critical role in mentorship of young leaders, but unfortunately, there is no implementation of political party act. You find that even when we're coming from the party, especially the youth wings at political parties, they are not empowered. They don't have budget, like I said. They're not even able to do the mentorship or even programs that they're supposed to do. And I said before, this goodwill should come from the leadership from above. I'll give you a practical example. In the Ministry of Youth, where Madam Lydia comes from, even the Cabinet Secretary is not a youth. Every time we find that the Ministry of Youth is being intermarried with other ministries, it means that they don't believe in us. We need an independent ministry. It's either is intermarried with sports, gender, ICT. Like now is intermarried with Ministry of ICT. It means even the state has no doesn't believe in youth. So these are the challenges that youth are facing, lack of political goodwill. Number two, I would say that our youth are very poor. They are not able to participate fully in elections. The political parties are very expensive. They are very, I don't even think there is a single party that is owned by political parties. We are in political parties owned by very old people. And that's how we are not able to participate fully. We are not able to have to participate independently. But I can say, for those county assemblies that have many young people, they are very effective. We have approximately 1,010 MCAs who are below 35. And some of these county assemblies with the young speakers, they are performing so well. We've seen very young people passing very good bills. And that shows that if young people are given opportunity, this country will go forward well. Thank you.
Been criticized. The president also on record mentioning this. I don't know how to approach this, but Lydia, in terms of implementation of certain issues, Anthumbi has mentioned the Political Parties Act. How do we actually move forward with this?
I think that's a very good question, and it's a good observation that Anita is making. But I think for some of us who've been in the youth movement for many years, over 1 decade, we have come to an understanding that it is not the age of the person who is delivering, but really their effectiveness in delivering, what they're doing. It doesn't matter what age they are. In fact, I did a survey earlier on at the beginning of this administration in 2013. And what 90% of young people said, it did not matter the age of a minister or a PS. What mattered is, are they able to deliver for young people? And if you think about the young people's issues, they are cross-cutting. They are health issues. They are agriculture. They are issues to do with production in agriculture and getting markets. They are issues to do with transport. There are issues to do with really every sector of the economy. And so what the administration chose to do is to do more of mainstreaming. Even if you have a home, it's more of a mainstreaming, and that is why there is a youth development officer in every ministry and every state department in this country right now. constantly advocating and pushing for youth programs. And if you look at the budget for the last financial year, you will see that there are youth programs now being run by the Ministry of Tourism. There are youth programs being run by the Ministry of Agriculture, youth programs being run by the Ministry of Health. And which is what we want, for every ministry to feel the burden of the empowerment of young people in this country. The other thing I'd like to mention is that we ought to be a bit careful when we are advocating for youth leadership, because again, if you think about the population, if you look at the category of people above the age of 18 in Kenya, half of them are within the age category of youth, and half of them are above the age category of youth. So really, none of these age groups have a right to rule over the other exclusively. And so what we need to advocate for more is intergenerational governance, so that you have both generations in the room always and on the table always, having a debate on and discussing how and what decisions are supposed to be made. And I think that's where we fail, the intergenerationalness of our leadership, so that was said earlier, you will find those tables are dominated then by one generation, and when we advocate as young people, we want all of them out and just young people on the table. I think we have to come to a place of that understanding of that intergenerationalness. And like you asked about the political parties, that is what we would like to see. We would like to see these political parties fine. They have these older, more experienced leaders, but they need to perhaps open up a little bit more, so that they have sort of succession management as well, so that when they are also not able to lead those political parties, they have people they have mentored. And we like when we see people like Sifuna in ODM, when we see leaders like Anita, even though they have abandoned the party, when we saw them nominated, I think that was an affirmation of youth leadership. The other thing I'd like to cite is that as young people, we need to understand that loyalty is key in political parties and in politics. Okay. So if we have this manner in which we are jumping, from one place to another because of impatience, because of ambition, then we will not be taken seriously. So we have to also show, that fortitude to stay the course and sort of demonstrate loyalty to the cause that a party is advocating, and be able to sort of gain trust, from both the older generation and from our own peers.
And Thumbi, I'd like your input on this. In terms of loyalty, does it point to a bigger picture that perhaps our political parties lack the very basic tenets of ideology, or it's down to us as leaders or youthful leaders as such that we definitely jump ship in terms of our own personal gain? What do you make of this?
Can I reply to that?
Yes, quite so.
Okay, about loyalty to the political party, I would say that is what the old guard has been using to oppress us young leaders. Because you're not supposed to have independent mind. You're not supposed to question anything. Like I have asked Lydia Mathia, we have almost 21 CSs. Why don't we have a single young person as a cabinet secretary? Why don't we have a single? Out of all those ministries, why don't we have a single independent ministry of youth? So that the question when we ask, we are told we are not loyal to the party. Mm-hmm. And I feel it's the highest time we need to implement the Political Party Act, where everybody feel included and everybody feel he has the right to make the decision. And what we're asking is, if indeed young people are human beings, then I think their right should be human right as well.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Gloria, even as you give your input on this, is it that impossible for the youth to form their own political party to push their agenda, even as we sensitize on intergenerational governance?
About 3 months ago, I actually tried to register a political party because I was mandated by an international organization that I was a country representative, Global Youth Parliament.
Okay.
It was shut down because the leadership and the people we had fronted as the initiators of the party were youth, and really it was just an issue of you're not about to have a youth political party. But let me say something. I heard Lydia say that, if young people would just stay put and, stay focused and stay the course, I think the only course we need to stay on is the youth agenda. So if the political parties are not looking at the youth agenda, we are definitely jumping ship. And I'm very proud of Anne Thumbi, because she has shown that, it's not just about being bulldozed. It's not about, I understand that she has actually been suspended for speaking up her mind. So when we look at these kind of political leaders who are representing us as the youth, these are the ones we should be emulating, because it's high time that when we get into those spaces, we are not just becoming cows. We are not just becoming sheep who are following whatever we are being told. We are actually standing and saying, this is what I think about, this is where the youth agenda should be pushed, and that's how government should be looking at youth. The youth are very energetic and they are very opinionated, and it's not just an opinion based out of facts. It's actually the passion to drive this country to a place where we can change it. So when we talk about the government assisting the youth, one of the things they should do is understand that we are not asking for youth cabinet secretaries just by mere age.
Yeah.
We are asking for them to understand that if you put a 75-year-old, if you put an 8-year-old to represent the youth, there is a huge disconnect. They might be youthful at heart, but in terms of understanding what the youth are going through now, no, it's not happening.
But the administrative secretaries are sort of youthful.
That's not even a position that is constitutional.
Yes.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
That position is actually illegal. So why are we being thrown for handouts? Why are we not being given the constitutional positions when we talk about the cabinet? Just appoint someone who, even if is youthful at heart and closer to the youth, and say this person actually resonates well with the youth and the message will get home, and appoint them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alenga, let me bring you into the conversation. Even as we talk about the shifting from one party to the other, especially seen among the youth, talk to us about implementation. Political Parties Act, we also have something in terms of policies and programs which implementation has been frivolous, if I may use that word. 30% of procurement from national or county government should go to young people. But is this really happening?
It's very sad when you think about the youth representation in this country. Often you find even a docket that purportedly serves the interest of the youth will be put under an aged person. Like you remember the appointment of former Vice President Modi Awori. That was it was like an insult to the young people in this country. You know, your future is being decided upon someone who really does not resonate with your world, does not understand your challenges. Today, our challenges are pretty different. I interacted with an older generation person in a company I worked with, and we had a forum where we were discussing our issues. And when I asked them to have a salary review, he told me, you know, when I was first employed in 1975, I was earning 500 shillings. Then I was like, if this is the kind of thinking, then clearly you cannot feel the pains of the young people today, because we are totally in a different environment. The challenges are totally different, and then we need to have an adjustment. And this adjustment can only be brought by someone who feels what we go through, someone who understands what we go through. But the biggest indictment is not really on the young people and their behavior when they're even given the positions. Yeah. But I will want to pick on what Lydia said, that loyalty is key, but I want to understand it from a different perspective, that young people in the small positions they get in, they're supposed to cultivate a level of trust in that position and loyalty in that position, and be able to draw fellow young people, but not to get into those positions and start fighting other people's wars, because every generation has to fight its wars. So if you get into a government, and then when you realize there may be two sides in a government, and you choose one side to side with, and then you begin running around the country just propagating the dreams of other people and forgetting entirely that you represent a population that is deeply marginalized. Do everything in your space to be able to advocate for these people, to create opportunities for them, to pull the others who are not even in that position to be able to get onto their feet. And then if we do that, then we'll be able to be collectively standing up for our generation. Okay. If you look at the leaders of the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, they actually held each other's hands. They were very young and they worked together. When they met, they did not meet to discuss kieleweke or tangatanga of those days, but they met to discuss ideologies. They met to impart one another. And that's why you see, even in the youth movement of the 60s, soon after we had gotten independence, and even back before independence, the push towards independence governments had a very nationalistic face. We had people like Ronald Ngala from the coast. We had people people like Eliud Matthew from Central. We had people like Masinde Muliro from Western. So it was really a nationalistic face.
Okay.
But today what we have is youth are being used to propagate the tribal agenda, and they are silently being used and they don't see. When they are used in those positions to propagate the tribal agenda of a certain kingpin, they think they are in places of privilege where they now have to focus on the trappings that they are they are accruing from that association with a particular leader.
Okay.
It's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be you're in the space to expand the space for others.
Exactly, and it's all about action-based politics. Lydia, even as I come to you, and perhaps you expound on your intergenerational governance point, how long should we continue singing the old guard's tunes? I mean, we're definitely being used to pass a certain agenda, or when it comes to politics, that's when the importance of the youth is actually on the front agenda during the political cycles. But will we continue singing their tune for too long?
Let me say that what the previous speaker said is very, very correct. That there's a sense in which, as young people, even when we get into positions, we forget that we represent our own constituency. And what has happened is there's a lot of individualism, and because of that individualism, you see now, because of survival, trying to survive as your own person, you find that you have to attach yourselves to a particular individual and kingpin or leader so that you can have relevance. But if young people could organize, if they could come together in a united way and front for their own interest, and we have seen that work even as late as I'd say 5 or so years ago, when there were those national youth conventions that used to be convened by the youth agenda, and we used to have thousands of young people coming together and saying, this is what we want the government to deliver for us. And it didn't matter which parties those young people would come from. And that's where things like the Youth Fund came from, things like the Youth Marshall Plan, things like the National Youth Council. Some of us were in that fight, and that's how we ended up having, for instance, the National Youth Council. We saw recently a bit of an example of that kind of a unity when young people came together and advocated after the first BBI report came out, and advocated, noticing that there was a huge gap in terms of young people's issues had not been captured in the first report. And you could see now the impact of that organizing and the coming together in the second report, where now you saw, the Youth Commission was included. There's the 15% incentive for political parties to attract young people. For a political party to get the political parties fund, 15%, they must demonstrate that they had actually gotten young people into Senate and in Parliament and these kinds of positions. And I think then if you think about it that way, if young people could organize beyond their narrow interest, we are not saying abandon your political party, abandon your political mentors and those kinds of things, but we're saying there is a space for young people to come together and united advance their ideas. And so for us, for those of us who support, for instance, BBI, we're very happy that at least that moment of organizing that captured the gains, such as the Youth Commission, will help the next generation. But if we really want to impact the coming generation and ourselves, okay, in terms of managing politics in this country, there is no two ways about it. Organizing, unity, and coming together is the only way, because when you are an individual, you have very little impact. But when you're together, you form a network, and networks become movements, and it is movements that change the world.
Anthumbi, how best can we address the disconnect between the young voters on the ground who feel they have been shunned despite having youthful leaders in various positions? Because, I mean, if the youthful population feel they've been shunned, it might lead to, voter apathy. This might not lead to proper representation in various positions. How do we deal with this?
I think the only challenge, like I said, is implementation of Constitution 2010 that we passed by 62%. When you talk about BBI, let me respond to that because Lydia has talked about BBI. what we asked for, I don't think we asked for youth commission. We asked for independent ministry with youth representation in all government sectors and appointments. Because honestly, if you talk about youth commission, it will be just be like any other commission. We have women commission, which is GEC, that is so useless. It doesn't advocate for women issues. Even to implement to that gender rule, it has been an issue. Even lobbying, it has been an issue. So I feel we didn't need a youth commission. And about BBI, even as we did our participation, we participated, we presented our views. Unfortunately, some of them were not listened to. They are not in the final report. Yeah. And I feel it is the highest time we stop lying to the youth that they're being helped by the government, because they are still poor. And what is happening, the rate of corruption is very high. Let's take example of KEMSA. We didn't see very youth or very young people participating in those tenders. These are older guard as usual. And what we feel is that anything that is having its issues, there's a lot of corruption. Let's take example of NYS. It was a very huge scandal. NYC, they don't take it seriously. It's not functional. Youth fund, everything was taken. So I think it's the highest time we strengthen our institutions that are relating to youth. Let us strengthen our ministry. Let it be dependent. Let us have our own cabinet secretary who is youthful. Right. Even if it will be Lydia Mathia, we don't have to have a cabinet secretary who is above 60 years. So we feel we are being ignored. We feel we are being marginalized in all sectors.
Okay, you're a leader and you feel you're being ignored and marginalized. Interesting. Let's talk to the issues surrounding the BBI. Just briefly, Gloria, what do you make of the Youth Commission? What do you make of the goodies in terms of the youthful population in Kenya that are promised in the BBI?
I'm glad that one of the drivers of that initiative, who's in this panel, has actually acknowledged that when the Building Bridges initiative started, there was no youth representation. Because, Jesse, I wrote a lot of articles in the newspaper. I literally went down out in the street saying, you know, the youth can also build bridges. And that's when we started seeing the task force trying to quickly, you know, scamper and put together what I call the youth cartel. These are people who've been in that spaces purporting to push the youth agenda, and suddenly they were brought to the table, this cartel, and they decided, okay, you know what? These people don't have jobs. These youth people, they're talking about economic empowerment. Let's just, you know, throw them a tax break of 7 years. So let me say this. There are some good things in the Building Bridges initiative, but they don't touch on the youth agenda. They don't touch on the youth agenda at all. In fact, some of the things that I think, if they were put in multiple choices that I would vote, have nothing to do with the youth. The things that the Building Bridges initiative offered the youth are not the things that the youth asked for. Just as Anne has said, we are out here as the youth literally trying to empower ourselves economically. We are trying to create businesses. We are trying to get jobs. And what we were asking for is, let us approach the issue of job creation in a way that could be scaled up so that we can feel the impact. So we were expecting to see that maybe some thought process would be put in initiatives such as Kazi Mtaani. Some thought processes would be put in initiatives or in institutions such as Uwezo Fund, so that they are not only just throwing money, peanuts, because it is peanuts. You know, they give a group of is it 5 or 10 people, 50,000? When you split, it's like 10,000. We are in the social enterprises spaces, and I'm telling you, what business are you going to start with 10,000 shillings? Yes, you might put up a choma sausage stand, yeah? But how many jobs is that stand going to create? Because the purpose we are trying to push here is job creation. When you look at the tax breaks, I've talked about this before. When you give us a 7-year tax break, and that means as a youth in Kenyan constitution is 18 to 34. 35 years old. By the time you're starting a business, you're 33. So how many of those 7 years are you actually going to feel the impact? When you look at the expansion of the executive, and this question I always pose to these drivers of this initiative, when you look at the expansion of the executive, why didn't they put a caveat to say that even the second deputy prime minister would be, you know, it would be either going to the women or to the youth or something? And by the way, Jesse, what they don't tell us also is that when they bring in this initiative, we are losing 4 slots as the youth and as people with disabilities. We are losing 4 slots in the Senate. So they've taken that away. So they're actually, this initiative has nothing to do with the youth. The goodies that are being thrown here there is to cover up the issues that have been addressed. National Youth Commission, and the one led by Roy, is exactly what is being fronted now as the National Youth Council that they want to put. The only difference it is going to be, and the NYC that we have now is semi-autonomous. It sits under the ministry.
Okay.
And what they are proposing is now an autonomous commission. But then it doesn't mean anything, because in terms of budget, in terms of now pushing that agenda, it's copy-paste. It's the same thing.
Allow me to bring in the other panelist. Alenga, what do you make of the BBI, and does it truly touch on the youth agenda?
JC, I always want to be a very good friend of history, because history doesn't get it wrong. Yeah. When Kenyans were fighting for independence, we had our first representation in the LegCo, the Legislative Council. But then it was only one slot, and Kenyans did not at the time say that we do not want this because it's just one person, what impact can they bring? But they built on that to be able to articulate the issues of Kenya and the issues of the people of Kenya, and that's why, that's how the journey towards getting independence began. So it is very, it's quite disingenuous for us to misinform the public about the BBI. If there is a youth council in the BBI and it has never been there, then I think it's an avenue for us to get into it and see how it can help us to advance the youth agenda. When we do that and then it defeats us, then we can now come back to the table and say, well, you created this youth council that is not effective. But then we cannot dismiss it even before we try to take advantage of such a platform. If this for the very first time is being anchored in the law, then it's a very positive thing. And then also for I think it's wrong for Gloria to misinform us that we are losing 4 slots in the BBI. That's entirely not true. Read the document clearly. I have always said in this country we are very good at personalizing or putting a personality on any initiative. This initiative, if you look at the opponents of the BBI, you will clearly see they are opposing it because of personalities, not really the content. So let us take time as young people to be able to read the content of the BBI with impartiality and then inform ourselves whether we do not want that. But then most fundamental to discuss is, let's look at the gains that come with the BBI. And then let's ask ourselves, where is my battleground? Where do I benefit from this BBI? For instance, if I look at the increase of 35% revenue, and then I map it to increase in the executive positions, well, then I have to settle for that 35 because it comes directly to my home county, which is going to have an expansion even in the wage bill so that it employs more young people, so that it's able to pay the county staff, so that a few things are able to be done in the counties. And even if these funds are trickling down to my area MCA, then I can now put him to account to fix the things that fall within our ward of Central Maragoli directly, not really looking at the executive. Whether the executive is reduced to even one person, that does not benefit me back home. That does not benefit me in my personal capacity as a young person. But if there is avenues that I can now be able to articulate my issues as a young person, then that is where BBI answers my question, and that is where I have to dwell. But then we must also remember, BBI is not like a vaccine that is supposed to cure all of our problems. I always hear the opponents of the BBI register this, that BBI has some few good things. Then why don't we want to take advantage of the good things?
We want to vote for them.
If BBI solves if BBI solves about 5 problems, why can't we start by solving 5 problems? But we want to maintain the status quo, but to whose benefit? To the benefit of an individual that we know.
So are you supporting a multiple, in terms of voting
honestly,
for what you want?
It's actually a fact that we are losing 4. That's the reason why Isaac Mwaura and the people with disability went back to the task force saying that they literally are losing the nominated seats for the people with disability and the youth. So that's a fact. I could get a degree in the Bridges Initiative.
All right. Lydia, let me bring you. Bring you on board. You definitely
when you say that the BBI.
Okay.
Can I talk on the issue of increment of 15 to 35% that is coming to the counties?
Okay, briefly, before we engage Lydia on this.
Yes, I think when we tell Kenyans, when we tell the youth that we're going to increase, that the BBI's report is increasing now 15% to 35%, is not practical. Let us take, for instance, the budget for this year, 2020-2021. We have a budget of 3.02 trillion. That we are expecting around 366 billion will go to devolution. Which percentage is that? Around 10.6. If at all, even now, we are not even able to get even 11%. How are we going to get 35%?
Okay.
At the county assembly of Nairobi County, we've never gotten more than 12%. Actually, in all 47 counties. So telling us we are going to get 35% is not practical.
So these are some of the challenges. Okay, I get you. Lydia, let me bring Lydia into this. I mean, all this then it's been anchored into law, sort of being the background of pushing this. What do you make of the of this deliberations on the BBI?
I think let's start with the fact that I think this show is allowing a lot of sweeping statements that are inaccurate. They are false. The loss of seats for the youth, I think there are 2 seats, yes, that have been lost in I think it's the Senate, but in Parliament, I think we got those back. For the persons with disability, they got all their seats back. I think the first report is the one that had an issue. And let me say this is the reason that the BBI is looking the way it is looking. It is because now the Senate is the house of equality of the counties and equality of the genders. So you've got all counties are equal. It doesn't matter, because if you nominate people to the Senate, you're going to have perhaps 1 or 2 other people from one particular county. But if you take it on principle that the Senate is the house of equality of the counties, and therefore you have an equal representation, and then you have the equality of genders. So you have a man and a woman going to the Senate. That is the principle behind why the Senate is looking the way it is looking in the BBI.
But so it's a fact we've lost the youth seats. That's a fact.
Thank you very much. May I just finish? The National Assembly is the house of equality of the vote and special interest. So that is where you would find now the special interests, such as young people's nominees going into the National Assembly, and that is why it is looking the way it is looking. Let me also say this this morning. There is the criticism that we are not thinking through youth programs, and I want to pose that is completely false, because
all right, we seem to have lost Lydia.
Because of the many young lost jobs due to COVID. But if I was saying that the Kazi Mtaani is the program that was an emergency program because of the many young people that had lost their jobs because of COVID. Yeah. But there are many other programs that are more wholesome. If you look at the Kenya Youth Employment and Opportunities Project, it's been running for the last 4 years. It's 15 billion shillings worth, and it takes young people through a whole 6 months of mentorship in in life skills and life skills training. They also go through core business skills training. They go through industry specific training, and then they go through internship that is paid. Let us talk about the Young Africa Works. It's a 13 billion shillings project. It's talking about online work. It's also bringing in a lot of agriculture-based jobs to young people. So I think the leaders in this panel have a responsibility to inform themselves so that they do not misinform other young people. They should know better so that the criticism is a little bit more curated. Finally, let me say this. We have a proposal to have the Biashara Kenya Fund. And the Biashara Kenya Fund is supposed to overcome all the challenges that we have been seeing with the Youth Fund and Uwezo Fund, where young people are required to be in groups. They are required to be, for instance, if you turn 30, as a young man, if you turn 35, tomorrow there is no fund available for you, whether through the fund or through the Uwezo Fund. But what is happening to Biashara Kenya Fund? We are seeing Tanga MPs within the committee in Parliament opposing it. And it is the solution to all these problems. With Biashara Fund Kenya Fund, you could be able to borrow 1 million shillings without ever having borrowed money before. Because we understand that even to get a stall in town today, to start a small business, you need more than 100,000 shillings or 200,000 shillings. But the Tanga MPs in the committee have blocked Biashara Kenya Fund regulations because of the politics of the day, and young people's welfare and fortunes for the future are being sabotaged in that committee by Tanga MPs. And so I think when we when we come to these kinds of forums to talk about young people and their issues, it is important that we inform ourselves with facts so that we do not misinform other young people who think what we are saying is true.
Okay. I have to give a right of reply. I'm under pressure because of time. So I'll start with Alenga. Alenga, kindly give us your right of reply as we conclude.
I would actually want to respond to our able MCA from Nairobi. That the BBI is not proposing to create new money from which they will give 35% for you to justify the question of where will this money come from. What we are saying is the government was given to the counties 15% and retaining a whole 85%. So instead of retaining 85%, the national government is going to retain 65% and give 35% to the counties. That is an improvement. That's a good thing. But the caveat emptor on this statement is that government that we are hoping will implement that 35% is not the Jubilee government that you belong to. That one, even if we are adding only 0.01, they would not give. So let's have hope and let's be futuristic.
Okay, Gloria, what's your take?
First of all, it's good that we speak facts. Kazi Mtaani was not started because of COVID. Kazi Mtaani existed before that. It's actually a scaled-up operation of what Waititu was trying to do for the drug addicts in Kiambu. So it had nothing. There was no thought process. There was nothing. And even as we speak of Kazi Mtaani, the same youth who are supposed to earn 500 shillings a day are losing around 50 shillings to the youth cartels. When you talk about coming to national television and speaking facts, the fact is we did lose 2 seats in the Senate. The Senate is the highest house, and why, as much as you want to say that there is a business justification on why we lost those seats, we are talking about the youth agenda, we are talking about youth inclusion, and so we should have never allowed for those 2 seats that were dedicated to the youth to be lost.
Even for equality?
Even for equality. We are focused on the youth agenda,
and
that is why as youth leaders, these are the things that we fight for.
Okay.
Yes.
That makes sense. Let's go to Anthumbi. Your take before we listen to what Lydia has to say about this, briefly.
I think what they are not telling us is that all these youth goodies, they are in 90% of the BBI. The 10% that is the bill that Wajiko will vote for has no those goodies. The question is, how are we going to implement the 90% that is not in the bill? Do we have a budget for that? Because those are legal issue, policy issue, administrative issues.
Okay.
So are we having that budget to make sure we implement the 90% where the goodies for the youth are? I'm not sure. So, like I said before, the issue is not about the BBI. The issue is implementation. Like 2010 Constitution, Article 55, Article 100. Let's implement that and we'll have a very, very smooth country.
Lydia.
And our youth will go forward.
Lydia, let's listen to what you have to say. A couple of issues have a reason. Kindly, in the interest of time, if you could make it brief.
I think for us, in terms of the 2 seats in the Senate, we are happy with the equality of the counties and equality of the genders, because we know within the genders as well, the gender category as well, we will be able to have young women go into the Senate, and we are still very happy about that. Let me also say one final thing, Rogers, that this dismissal of the Youth Commission that is in the BBI is an utter mistake.
All right, we seem to have lost there right there. Unfortunately.
Sorry, I can hear.
Okay, sorry, 30 seconds, kindly.
Thank you. Yes, the Youth Commission is able to interact with agencies within the executive. It is able to interact with the legislature, is able to interact with the judiciary, even private sector players and development partners, questioning how the Article 55, which provides for the rights of the youth, are being implemented. Right now, if you have something within a ministry, a minister is never able to tell another minister what to do. A PS is not able to ever tell another PS what to do. So you need something that is superior to a ministry, and a commission is a solution to that, so that they can always query. Ministry of Agriculture, did you issue the 30% tenders that you were supposed to issue to young people in the last financial year? Ministry of Health, did you actually implement the part of the policy on youth health that is your responsibility?
Okay, unfortunately we've run out of time, and I'd like to ask panelists kindly, if we call you next time, let's come in totality so we can totally conclude on some of the pending matters in terms of representation, in terms of NYC, what the BBI has in store really for the youth agenda, also going forward, the equality aspect as well. Well, it was interesting. I'm Thumbi, the MCA in the Nairobi County Assembly. Gloria Roba, always a pleasure, youth policy analyst. Alenga Torosted, who's a political analyst, adding your impetus right here. And Lydia Mathia joining us via way of Zoom, who's a policy analyst. We definitely appreciate your input right here. Let's make more time to actually push the youth agenda forward right here. We take a short break right now. We'll be back with much more. Stay with us.